On today's show, we power rank the Southwest Division. Can the Grizzlies survive Ja Morant's 25-game suspension? Are the Pelicans or Mavericks sneaky contenders? Can the Rockets make the leap? And how will the Spurs use Victor Wembanyama? All of that and much more on today's Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On NBA. I'm Wes Goldberg here with Adam Mares. However you might be tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. For the next few weeks on Fridays, we're going to be power ranking each division in the NBA, predicting where each team will finish the regular season, then get to some categories like best offseason addition, most likely to blow it up. Last week, we broke down the Central Division. Today, we're going to go to the Western Conference and take a look at the Southwest Division. Last season,
is this the worst? Hold on, Wes. Is this the worst named division in all of sports? Do you the old Southwest, Memphis?
We might have got. It's the most inaccurate. Other than they should have just called it Texas plus a couple of other teams.
Yeah, I mean, New Orleans, Memphis are not traditionally thought of as Southwest.
No, they could have just said South. Yeah, the South Division.
The South Division. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not great. So last season in the poorly named Southwest Division, the Grizzlies won it. That was followed by the Pelicans, Mavericks, Rockets, and then the Spurs. Got to say, this is one of the tougher divisions to break down because there's just so many variables, new things that are kind of hard to predict. Obviously, a lot of new players too, new coaches, Adam. But let's just start right at the top. I still have the Grizzlies winning this division. What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, Dallas is such an enigma to me, as is New Orleans. This is and to be honest, Memphis as well with the Ja Morant situation, some new pieces. So to me, this is a division that could go a variety of different ways and wouldn't surprise me. I think it's one of those three teams. If you told me Zion and Brandon Ingram were going to be healthy and committed to playing all year, I'd say, you know what? New Orleans is right there with any of them. If you told me that Luka, best shape of his life as it appears, I don't know, Wes, if you've seen the offseason. Every year there's an offseason best shape of his life guy. I think it's Luka, man. He's looking slim. He's looking thin. You know, if he comes back and gels with Kyrie, Grant Williams, the new additions there, some good role players at the back end of that rotation, it could be them. So for me, all three of those teams have a really good shot at claiming number one.
I think it's between those three. I'm with you. It would not shock me if Dallas were to win this division. I ultimately settled on Memphis because I went safe. I went safe with this one. This is a 50-win machine. The Memphis Grizzlies. The fact that Ja Morant got suspended 25 games, less than I think a lot of people thought he could get suspended. I think more, maybe more than some people also expected, but they're okay without Ja Morant. They're 37-24 all time without Ja Morant. Now, the loss of Tyus Jones is tough. They did add Marcus Smart. I'm not sure that that's like a huge improvement. You know what I mean? I thought Tyus Jones, I remember talking with Dylan Brooks last year and Desmond Bane both. And during Ja's first suspension, and when the Grizzlies kind of rattled off like a 3-game win streak during Ja's suspension, I said, how do you guys do this? Why is it that you guys can be successful without Ja Morant? And both of them told me point blank, Tyus. That's why. It's because of him. And they trade him to Washington. They bring in Marcus Smart. Marcus Smart will be able to hold it down a little bit at point guard, but again,
I love that we're discounting Marcus Smart over Tyus Jones here. Like,
I just like the chemistry that Tyus Jones already had. I don't know. They also added Derrick Rose, so they've got some options there at point guard. But again, I'm playing it safe. I think they're well coached. I think they've got good players. Let's just go through the depth chart. We'll start with Memphis, and then you mentioned New Orleans and Dallas, and we'll get to them too in a second here. But Ja Morant's your starting point guard for the first 25 games. It'll be Marcus Smart, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr. at power forward, who's basically one of the standouts on Team USA right now, and then Steven Adams at center. The big kind of wild card here is small forward. They've got John Conchar, big body David Roddy, and then Zaire Williams. Kind of three guys who are going to be competing for minutes there at small forward, obviously with Dylan Brooks having left to Houston. But I think it's a solid depth chart. I think they've got a bunch of depth everywhere. One thing that's going to hurt is Brandon Clark not being there. He's still out with that Achilles tear from the playoffs. But I think there's enough here, and they just tend to win games, and there's a good foundation, and I'm playing it safe. And I think Memphis wins another – I would probably put their floor at like 47, 48 wins, and that could be enough to win this division.
You are playing it safe. I'm going to be a little more reckless. Marcus Smart, to me, brings something to this team that they needed. I mean, he brings the defense that a Dillon Brooks that you lose in a Dillon Brooks, but I think he might bring some cohesion to this lineup, to this roster. I think he might help this lineup grow up a little bit. And not having Ja Morant there might also help for them to just have a new look, a new focus, a new identity, a new soul. And then when Ja Morant returns to the team, hopefully he brings more of the positives that he has always brought, and with a team that maybe has a little bit more of a solid identity. So I kind of like the situation in Memphis, and I could see it breaking really well for them. First of all, your defense is going to get better. If you replace Ja Morant with Marcus Smart, your defense should improve. That should be a good defensive lineup. You got Jaren Jackson in there, and of course Steven Adams.
And it helps take care of the loss of Dillon Brooks too. Marcus Smart basically replaces Dillon Brooks in terms of your defensive.
Maybe even improves from Dillon Brooks, to be honest with you. Yeah. And so I just like that mix of players. Ja Morant maybe complicates things because then who's coming off the bench? When he comes back.
Could you start Ja Morant, Marcus Smart, Desmond Bane? Jaren Jackson and Adams.
So Ja Morant, Desmond Bane were a phenomenal backcourt, and they're kind of this two-headed attack. One from three and off of screens and running around, and obviously one attacking the basket. But that's not exactly the best defensive lineup. You do have the great defensive backstop with Jaren Jackson Jr. Yeah. But I do wonder if Marcus Smart is more of a playoff caliber running mate for a Ja Morant, and Desmond Bane then becomes the six-man scorer off the bench or what have you. Maybe you try to play all three. Maybe you go three. I mean, we just talked about that small forward spot being up in flux. It's probably the way they go, although I hate three-guard lineups, especially when it's undersized. Yeah. I don't know if that's a recipe for playoff success. And I'll tell you one guy we haven't talked about. This is peak off-season content here.
Can I guess?
Josh Christopher.
Oh, okay.
Interesting flyer. The guy's a bucket getter, man. Yeah. He's a bucket taker. He's definitely a shot taker. But he's a guy young, early on with Ja Morant out. Does he get an opportunity? And sometimes with young players who have talent, they find the right situation, opportunity, a little bit of maturity. They could take advantage of it. So I'm kind of intrigued by him. But this lineup to me, I just like the Marcus Smart addition. I'm high on them, even if I don't have them winning the division. I'm still really high on them as a team.
So right now, FanDuel's odds have Memphis and Dallas tied for the best odds, both plus 160 to win this division. Let's talk Dallas. I have them at number 2. I only have them at number 2. I think their floor is lower than Memphis's floor, right? And that's why, again, I'm playing it safe. Memphis. Well, look, this is Dallas's records. This is their record by season since acquiring Luka Doncic. 33-49, 43-32, 42-30, 52-30, and then 38-44. So they really had that 2 years ago. They had that 50-win season that everybody thought they were turning the corner, and then they just kind of settled back to what they were. And I know there's a lot of things going on last year with the Kyrie deal and all these things, but they're basically kind of a 500 team, maybe slightly above average, on average, during Luka's career. And while Memphis is basically just turning out 50-win regular seasons. So, again, I like Dallas. I kind of tend to favor the better players, and Luka still is one of the top 5 players in the NBA, and I think that it would be very surprising if they didn't make the playoffs for a second year in a row. It wouldn't shock me if they won this division. I just had Memphis number 1 and Dallas number 2 because I had to pick. And so, but these are my clear top two teams in this division.
I mean, I think we're all just a little shook because Dallas, missing the playoffs last year. It's hard to say, well, that's not the real them, especially when the Kyrie Irving piece, I think everybody kind of carries the baggage of he really has wrecked a handful of teams in a row and they've underperformed, whether it's all his fault or partially his fault or just coincidental or whatever. Nonetheless, I think that's what plays into people's expectation. But we have to look at it and say, Luka's a hell of a player. He's a top 6 player at worst in the NBA right now. And I expect a bounce back season. I think last year was a tumultuous season. It looked like he ran out of mental energy, emotional energy towards the end of the year. But they have pieces. I think that this is a bad defensive lineup or bad defensive team. But I'm not sure how you're going to be able to stop this combination of players. First of all, Maxi Kleber always gives you that 5-out option, that player that stretches the court and just gives you all that space for a Kyrie and a Luka to operate. And we know how good they are at that. And then you have Derrick Jones Jr., a late addition here, who, again, I don't think is like a playoff piece. I don't know that he's a guy that you're going to win a bunch of playoff series with, but in a regular season, him as the roll man in a 5-out lineup, or a 4-out with him rolling to the rim, hyper athletic, one of the most athletic guys, best lob finishers. I just think they're going to be impossible to guard. And impossible to guard is a great recipe for regular season success. So I'm expecting a bounce back year. I think, again, I'm not sure. I'm going to have to wait a second to see who I pick to win the division. But I think that Dallas has a really good chance, and I think they're going to be great. And then lastly, let me give you a little insight here. They had their guards at the end of this rotation, Dante Exum, McKinley Wright. I love McKinley Wright. I think he's a really smart player. He obviously comes from CU up here in my neck of the woods. He's a smart player who's undersized, but I think can actually be an impact regular season. And then I'm even higher on Dante Exum, who just spent the last year playing for Jelko Obradovic, one of the greatest coaches not in the NBA, probably the greatest coach not in the NBA, playing for Partizan Belgrade. I think that was a great reset for him. And I'm not saying I know he'll come back and be an impact player in the NBA, but I think the route he has taken, to me, gives him the best chance to have a bounce back and get back into the NBA. And he's a talented player. So I'm excited to watch him and see how he's grown as a player.
I love the insight on Dante Exum. The Grant Williams thing is the biggest addition. That could be the game changer for them. Although I do have some troubling defensive statistics in regards to Dallas. We're going to get to that next here on Locked On NBA. Today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Look, I love my Bird Dogs. They make me look good with their stretch khaki shorts designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. To put it another way, Bird Dog shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but fit way better. They don't cost as much, and they're way better than regular shorts that are just made of stiff, restricting cotton. You don't want that. So Bird Dogs fixes this issue by inventing a cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki but stretches so you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. Plus, with their built-in liner, let's just say that they're liberating. Adam, they're liberating. Okay?
They're so liberating, that built-in liner.
It's a game changer.
Yeah.
Bird Dogs also uses anti-stink sweat-wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. Trust me, get yourself a pair. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA or enter the promo code LockedOnNBA for a free white tech hat. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA or use that promo code LockedOnNBA at checkout for a free white tech hat with your order. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you. Thanks again for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Continuing on with our power rankings of the Southwest Division. In a moment here, we'll get to our best offseason additions and the team most likely to blow it up in this division. But I teased some defensive stuff with Dallas. So Grant Williams is like the big addition that they make here. Just to go through the depth chart really quick. Luka and Kyrie is your starting backcourt. They bring back Kyrie Irving on the contract extension or the new contract rather. I think Josh Green ends up getting the start at small forward over Tim Hardaway Jr., giving them a little bit more defensive chutzpah in that starting five. Sure. And then you've got Grant Williams, the new addition from Boston at power forward, and then Dwight Powell starting at center. I think the Grant Williams thing is huge for them. And no disrespect to Dwight Powell or Josh Green, he's like the one really good defender, basically on the entire team.
Yeah.
So he's going to have a lot of work cut out for him. Here's Dallas's defensive ratings, and here's the stat that I was teasing before. Again, since Luka, this is where they finished in defensive rating against the rest of the league. 18th in Luka's rookie season, 18th the year after, 21st, 7th, and then 25th. So again, that 52-win season was the one outlier year. And even during that outlier year, everybody was kind of looking around like, how is this happening? We didn't really understand why. Like, it wasn't like something that made a whole lot of sense. This makes more sense. They're kind of like they're a below average defense while Luka is there. And a lot of that is on Luka, man. Like, he needs to show so much more effort on the defensive end. At the end of last year with Luka and Kyrie on the floor together, those were two guards who could care less about defense. Like, just leaving guys wide open, not closing out. It was some of the most lazy defense I've seen. Hopefully, to your point, Luka comes back re-energized and invigorated and kind of caring. I think Kyrie is what he is defensively. We've seen moments where he tries hard, like in the playoffs or in the finals with Cleveland, but it's been a minute, man, since we've seen Kyrie try hard on defense. it's kind of on Luka as the leader of this team to set that tone there. Luka and Kyrie together still is a positive. 444 minutes together. They had 119 offensive rating, 115 defensive rating. That's plus 4.2 points per 100 possessions. But that should be so much better with that kind of talent between Luka and Kyrie. And it would come on just kind of stepping up defensively. And that's where Luka comes in. Like Grant Williams, all that stuff is nice, but Luka's just got to be better defensively. He's just got to try harder.
I just don't know if you're getting that. To me, that's the thing about this team that makes me a little gun shy about their chances to win the division. I think it's going to be a team that on nights blows out the top teams in the NBA by 20, 30 points. But I think there's also going to be nights where they lose to the worst teams in the NBA by 15 points. And you say, how the heck did that happen? They're just an offensive juggernaut and a defensive sieve. And I don't see a way that they're going to change that. Two other variables. You do get Jason Kidd in year 3. Jason Kidd's trajectory as a coach usually just gets diminishing returns year after year. So you have to worry about that. And then as you look at their roster, they've got a lot of combinations that you like one directionally. Can you throw out Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, Seth Curry, Tim Hardaway Jr., and then Maxi Kleber and say, okay, how do you guard that? Yes, but who does that unit guard? Nobody. Can you throw out Grant Williams and Josh Green? Put some combinations.
End of list of good defenders, right?
Rashawn Holmes. I got Rashawn Holmes there. I like Rashawn Holmes. You throw that out there and you say, okay, are they going to get some stops? Sure, but how are they going to score? So for me, I think that's going to be the problem that's going to be very a slippery slope of do you go offense or defense because you always take from one hand to give to the other.
Yeah. Quickly, and then we'll move on to New Orleans. So their key additions, Grant Williams, Seth Curry, Dante Exum, all guys you mentioned, Rashawn Holmes. They draft Omax and Derek Lively in the first round. They added Derek Jones Jr. this past week. They lose Christian Wood. So those are sort of the adds and losses for Dallas. But
I love all these. I'm telling you, McKinley Wright, Dante Exum, Seth Curry, Rashawn Holmes.
The additions.
Grant, these are all guys I like. Yeah. It's just they're all guys that have a flaw, and they're all flaws that it just seems like Dallas can't cover for. Right. Like I said, it's in one hand, out the other.
It's on Jason Kidd to kind of find the best kind of chemistry that just works. Like it's going to be a lot of, I think, at the beginning of the year, trial and error, kind of mixing in and experimenting with lineups. But let's move on to the New Orleans Pelicans. They finished last year 42-40. Started the year 26-17. Then basically everybody gets hurt. They finished the year 16-23. Without Zion Williamson all time, they're 82-112. So they're not good without Zion, and they tend to be very good with Zion. The problem is that Zion very rarely is healthy. Just 29 games last year. No real additions or losses on this team. Like they added Cody Zeller. That's cool, I guess. But like no real offseason movement for them. They're banking on Zion and Brandon Ingram, by the way, who's also accustomed to missing a lot of games, just being healthy. That's what they are banking on.
Yeah. But this is the thing. When players of that caliber are inconsistent in being on the court, and this is several years. This isn't last year. This is several years now. Yeah. If you're a GM like David Griffin, you probably look at your roster and say, I'm not sure we need to make a big shakeup. I don't even know what that shakeup would be because I haven't seen this team play yet. And I think that's where New Orleans is at. They're a little bit in limbo in that they have to decide, what direction they want to go. But here's why I love this roster and why I'm contemplating picking them to win the division, as crazy as that might sound. You mentioned Zion Williams. He's fantastic. He's an unbelievable player. When he plays, he's an impactful player. Brandon Ingram's been great. They haven't necessarily been great together. They've been very good together, but I still don't know if those are the two pieces you would want to pair. You could move off of one of them if you wanted to make a big splash. But here's what I love. Herbert Jones, my guy. It's our first Herbert Jones of the offseason, Wes.
I think it might be. That might be our first Herb Jones mention.
Herb Jones, baby. Drink. Dyson Daniels, Trey Murphy the third. These are phenomenal wings. I love this. They might have my favorite collection of wing players. They've also got Najee Marshall, who's not bad. They might have my favorite collection of wing players in all of the NBA, and they have a plethora of them. So this is a team to me that I understand why David Griffin would not make big moves this offseason. I understand why he would say, I think we might actually be really good. We just don't know if we'll ever get our guys on the court. They might not get on the court this year. They might not stay on the court. But I think that if they are healthy and if they do play, they're going to surprise a lot of people.
I think if they're healthy, they can win this division. I don't think there's any doubt about that based on their track record. It would be kind of crazy to say that they couldn't.
Though, right? It's not even just health. It's also just, well, I'm saying it's getting on the court. I mean, there have been reports about Ingram and Zion. Like, are they healthy enough to play, or are they not?
Right.
Are they too quick to sit out when some things happen? I mean, I think there was a report last year with Brandon Ingram about, being called out. I think, there have been players kind of calling out saying, hey, man, like we don't have to wait till we're 100% healthy. We're going to miss the playoffs. We're going to do this or that. So I think this is a year where somebody in that organization needs to say, guys, do we want it or not? And if we don't, then let's move and get some guys in here that help. That would be my concern. We talked about Memphis. Marcus Smart maybe brings a maturity to the team. This team needs a maturity. I wouldn't have minded if they would have signed a back of rotation veteran or two, just to be like, hey, somebody come in here and show, they could have used a Jeff Green to say, hey, come in here and show these guys, they need to be serious.
Do they still have their mid-level exception? Can they just throw it at Udonis Haslem, bring him out of retirement? Just like the guy that could just be like, all right, guys, let's be serious right now. Because you're right. Everybody kind of needs that guy. You mentioned the fact that David Griffin did not make the big move. There were rumors that they could trade Zion for the number 3 pick, maybe Brandon Ingram for the number 3 pick. I don't know how real that kind of stuff really was. I don't know if Portland ever was actually even serious about that. But that would have been, if you added Scoot Henderson and maybe subtract the Zion or Brandon Ingram, this roster does make a lot of sense. I mean, I don't know that Scoot and CJ McCollum is like what you want long-term, but I don't think that that wouldn't be your long-term solution.
Would you say, I don't know. Are you speculating that they have blow-up potential?
That's a good tease. That's a good tease. All right, let's go to Houston and then San Antonio real quick. Houston's interesting. 22-60 last year. And their story right now are their additions. Number one, they hire head coach Ime Udoka. They signed Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks. They draft Amen Thompson and Cam Whitmore, who was awesome in Summer League. And then they bring in Jeff Green. So they add a veteran coach, an experienced coach who holds players accountable, and Udoka. They add veterans VanVleet, Dylan Brooks, and Jeff Green. 2 really interesting rookies in Amen Thompson and Cam Whitmore. Their starting 5, Fred VanVleet, Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, Jabari Smith, Alperen Sengun. Off the bench, they've got Kevin Porter, Amen Thompson, Cam Whitmore, Terry Eason, Jock Landale, who they also added. They still have Aaron Holiday. They've got Jayshawn Tate coming off the bench.
They got players, man.
They got players. I like this roster. In terms of young rosters, it's one of my favorites, but it all really hinges on Jalen Green and his development. That's where it really comes. Can I give you a few more stats on Jalen Green before I throw it?
Please.
Ime Udoka's biggest thing is not fixing the defense. It's not doing all that stuff. His biggest job is unlocking Jalen Green and getting Jalen Green to play the way he ought to be playing. Way too many just pull-up jumpers from Jalen Green from his first 2 seasons in the NBA. What he should be doing is driving to the basket more. And now that he's playing with a real point guard in Fred VanVleet, I mean, no disrespect to Kevin Porter, but I kind of do. Now he's playing with a real point guard in Fred VanVleet. Maybe he can cool it a little bit, play off of Fred VanVleet, get more catch-and-shoot attempts. So here are the stats. Catch-and-shoot, Jalen Green last year, 3.2 field goal attempts from three-point range on catch-and-shoot. He made that at a 35% clip. Not great, but not awful. And definitely above his career averages from 3. Pull-up, 4 three-point attempts per game on pull-ups, 32%. So way worse and way below his averages. If he trades some of those pull-up shots for more catch-and-shoot shots, that three-point percentage is going to climb a little bit. Not a huge amount, but it'll climb a little bit. It'll get to at least league average, where right now it's below average. But the main thing to me here are the drives. Jalen Green is an athletic freak. He can dunk over anybody. He should be out there playing like young Russell Westbrook or Ja Morant, but he's not. He averaged 12.9 drives per game last year. That's as many as TJ McConnell, Adam. He drives as much as TJ McConnell.
That's rough.
So it was 8.8 as a rookie, 12.9 last year. So climbing a little bit, but that should be at like 18, 19, 20 drives per game. Get rid of some of those three-point attempts, which is obviously not in your wheelhouse, and just drive to the basket. And if you could do that, playing in space with VanVleet and Dylan Brooks and some of these other guys, if you could do that, Jabari Smith.
Yeah, Dylan Brooks giving you all that space.
I mean, at least he hangs out on the perimeter. He's not doing much else. So I don't know. That to me is Ime's biggest job, is just kind of making Jalen Green play more within his skill set. End of spiel.
I think Ime's biggest job is that he has a roster that for the first time in 3 years is going 2 different directions. And I think necessarily so.
Yeah.
The best way for a young player to come in is when they have a veteran player that they can surpass if they do the right things. That didn't happen in Houston. Those players that you just mentioned, the Jalen Greens, Jabari Smiths, Alperen Şengün, Tari Eason, all very talented, high upside players. They didn't have the veterans to compete with, the other players. So it was go explore your game. You want to take 5 pull-ups a game? Do that. You don't really like driving? It's okay. We want you to kind of explore your game here a little bit. This is a year now with a tougher coach who could say, Jalen Green, you're not doing what I want. Fred VanVleet is closing tonight. Amen Thompson is closing tonight. Jamari Smith, you're not doing what you need to do. Tari Eason is closing tonight. Jeff Green is closing. Jayshawn Tate is closing tonight. So now you have a roster that after 2 years, you established a culture, which was we want our young players to grow at any cost. Well, the cost was them not necessarily having discipline or growing in the direction you need. Now you bring in those veterans that represent that sort of discipline or that sort of consequence. And I hope it works out. Ime Udoka, I know it is a tough coach who got a lot out of Boston, but I know also ruffled some feathers in Boston. Not the off-court stuff. I'm just talking about with his team, with his roster. He was a hard guy to play for. You're going to get these guys who have had not been disciplined all of a sudden get supreme discipline and competition. And I'm just curious to see how it goes because I like their young players.
It's a really
I like Jabari Smith. I like Şengün. I like Jalen Green. I really like Tari Eason. Those are good players, and I'm just curious to see how they handle it.
Yeah, and I love the idea of adding veterans to a young group to kind of just bracket them, keep them accountable, and all these things. I'm not the biggest Fred VanVleet guy, but I like the idea of adding an experienced point guard who just knows what to do. So from that perspective for Houston, I get it. If anybody other than Toronto is going to pay him, I get it. So we've got that. All right, I want to touch on San Antonio. We're going to do that in the next segment, but we're working on our teases here on Locked On NBA. So how's this, Adam? Could Dallas trade Kyrie Irving? We'll talk about that next. Thanks again for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. All right, we're going to do the team most likely to blow it up. We're going to get to most interesting player in the Southwest Division, but let's wrap up our power rankings with the San Antonio Spurs. Finished last year 22-60. They draft Victor Wembanyama with the number 1 pick in the draft lottery that they, of course, won. I'm looking at their depth chart, Adam. They've got 6 guys who could probably start for them. So they've got some decisions to make, and it really comes down to whether or not they want to play Wemby at forward or at center. Now, in Summer League, they listed Wemby as a forward. He played both spots. He wants to play forward. He does not view himself as a center, which is the case for all centers that kind of look like big men that look like him. But I don't know. To me, it comes down to Trey Jones, Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, Victor Wembanyama, and then that 5th starter is either going to be Zach Collins or Jeremy Sochan. And I kind of like the idea of starting Collins so that you're starting him with a traditional 5 and you can let Wemby with that body type not have to guard other bigs like a Nikola Jokic or Joel Embiid or those guys. But what if Sochan can do that? What if you just like let him guard the 5? He's undersized, but if you just like make him do it anyway so that Wemby doesn't, it kind of equals the same thing. You're kind of getting the same thing done. So I think it's going to be 5 of those 6 guys, and it's going to come down to Collins or Sochan. And then other than that, they add Campaign, Reggie Bullock, Chetty Osman. They're just getting guys. They have Malachi Branham coming off the bench, who kind of showed some stuff at the end of last season. I don't know how much you want to go in on San Antonio. It's really the Victor Wembanyama show and kind of figuring out who else is going to be a core part of that. There's no spacing in that lineup really to speak of, but whatever. It's Wembanyama's rookie year. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, but can you put together a really nice defensive lineup? I mean, they haven't been good defensively in recent years. I love the idea of Sochan playing big with Wemby. I mean, again, it's unconventional. It's a little bit different. But the rim protection Wemby should offer as an off-ball rim protector, a roamer should be elite. So now you're just talking about, can a guy play that Rodman-esque? Yes, it's not just the hair. Sochan has a little bit of Rodman to him. Can he play that where he's just wrestling guys down on the block and then knowing that you have this alien behind you patrolling the paint? But more than anything, this is a team that, okay, they have the discipline from their own coach. Popovich obviously is not going to let undisciplined play fly. But now you got a lot of young guys. It's like, hey, why not experiment and play some of those lineups? Why not see if Sochan is a Wemby player, if Devin Vassell is a Wemby player, Keldon Johnson, you mentioned Malachi Branham. Are these guys, Blake Wesley, are these guys that fit into the long-term view? I think you want to experiment with that. And I think you want to get a lot of different looks. So I think they're interesting, even if I don't think they're going to be very good at all.
I would play those first four guys you mentioned. So Wemby and Sohan are already really close. That was evident at the NBA draft.
Right.
So I would play those two guys with Vassell as much as possible. I would play those three guys really together as much as possible. Because to me, answering the question, are those three guys basketball fits? Is there magic that can be made there? Do we see some hints of that? Is there kindling to that fire? Is what I'm trying to figure out in Wemby's rookie year. All right.
And by the way, I liked Blake Wesley at the draft. I couldn't tell you, to be honest, like how well he played over this last bit. I wasn't locked into him at the end of the year, locked into the Spurs. But, you know, I am curious to see if he's a guy that makes that second-year leap after being in the NBA.
There's some guys there. Let's go to offseason edition before we talk about the most interesting player in the division and team most likely to blow it up. Who do you is the best offseason addition in the division?
I went with Marcus Smart here. And
Okay.
It feels like a little bit of a hot take. If we're talking long-term, okay, there's an easy answer here. It's definitely Wembanyama. Is that going to be right out of the package? He's the most important new addition. I don't know. But I just look at Memphis and I go, we're going to have another question later on about who has the most blow-up potential. If it weren't for Marcus Smart, Memphis would be number one on my list. I just think he might be the guy that holds that team together and brings them a new element, a new layer that they've desperately needed.
I had Marcus Smart listed. Again, I'm thinking about – so I didn't include any of the rookies, including Wemby, because I was just sort of thinking like offseason edition, like free agents, trades, kind of things like that. So you and I are here aligned. But I don't know. I like Marcus Smart from Memphis. I really do like the addition. I keep poo-pooing it during this podcast where you're much higher on it than I am. I just don't know how much of an improvement over Tyus Jones it really marks. Like,
I love your Tyus Jones love. Where does it come from, Wes? He's a good player. I love Tyus Jones too, but
everybody. I don't know. Like, who knows?
It's like Monte Morris. You know, I like him.
He's fine. I just think he's like a really solid backup point guard. And I'll go back to my conversations I had with the Grizzlies last year. Like, they love that guy. They kept talking about how solid he is. And I guess best case scenario for Marcus Smart is he's solid. You know, they already had a solid guy. So I like the Marcus Smart addition. I just don't know how much of an improvement over Jones it's going to be. Where my biggest offseason addition was Grant Williams, because I think that is a huge improvement. They traded Dorian Finney-Smith at the deadline, losing all of their good defenders. And now they get a good defender in Grant Williams. And what's weird is, in a vacuum, I think I like Marcus Smart more as a player than Grant Williams. I'm actually not a big Grant Williams guy. But for this roster, it's a huge addition because it gives them a versatile defender who kind of allows them to play defense, which wasn't going to be a thing before the Grant Williams edition. And then you kind of consider him over even Dorian Finney-Smith, who, again, they had to trade to get Kyrie, but he's a better shooter than Finney-Smith. Finney-Smith was a 35% career three-point shooter. Grant Williams is a career 38% shooter. A little bit streaky, but so was Finney-Smith. They're comparable defensively. I think Grant actually guards centers probably better than DFS, so I think that can unlock some interesting lineups for Dallas. And again, I just underscore this the entire time. He is their only good defender. And I know Nick Angstadt and Dallas and Locked On Mavericks and all these people come. Josh Green is a good defender. Josh Green is an above average defender who has the potential to be a very good defender. Right now, Grant Williams is their only, like, this guy playoff level defender. We know it right out of the box. So I got Grant Williams, but Marcus Smart was my second one. So I think it's those two guys. All right. Most interesting player.
Oh, most interesting player. To me, this one is Zion. Who swings a team's odds more than a Zion Williamson this year? I mean, to me, are we getting the best Zion for like 60 games? If so, all right, New Orleans, welcome to the playoffs. This is a dangerous team. Nobody's going to want to play. Tough matchup, all these different things. If we're going to get the Zion that we got last year, this is the number one blow it up team by a mile, probably in the entire NBA.
Zion's a great choice. I almost went with Zion. I ended up going with Jose Alvarado. I'm kidding.
I was like, wow. I thought maybe you would say Tyus Jones, but you know.
Well, he's in a different division.
Oh, that's right.
I didn't overthink it. I went with Victor Wembanyama. All the things you said about Zion are absolutely true, and I actually think for the season and what it means for the rest of the NBA, Zion is by far the most interesting player in this division. But I'm going to be tuning into Wemby every night for at least the first month of Spurs basketball. Like, I got to watch this guy at the NBA level.
I can't wait to see the sadness in your eyes. Hold on, I can't wait for you to see the sadness in your eyes when Popovich benches him the first 5 games for missing a screen or something.
Oh, that'll be interesting.
Everybody's going to be tuned in. I can't wait to watch him, and Pop's going to be like, on the bench, young fella.
All right, let's go on. Team most likely to blow it up this season. I really wonder if we have the same team here.
Well, first of all, no shortage of teams to pick from. San Antonio is the only
opposite
team
of last week, right? We had none of these teams are going to blow it up in the Central Division. Now we're like, all these teams can blow it up.
Well, so San Antonio can't blow it up. They're not going to trade Wembanyama, and anything else doesn't really feel like blowing it up. So let's just eliminate them.
If they traded like Keldon Johnson at the deadline, it's like that doesn't count.
Right, that doesn't count. Houston is interesting because if you told me, okay, they're going to move on from Şengün, or Şengün and Jabari Smith, or Jalen Green and Jabari Smith, like that would be considered blowing it up since they are young pieces. But they would do that because they have other young people. They basically have enough for 2 young cores, and they decide which ones they wanted between Amen Thompson and Şengün and Porter and all these different things.
If Houston were to, let's say it's like February and they're like 15 games under 500 or 20 games under 500 or something. And they're like, you know what, this Van Vliet stuff, this Dylan Brooks stuff, it just didn't work. And now there's contenders offering us first-round picks for these guys. And they traded one or both of them. Would that be considered blowing it up? Because you wouldn't consider the long-term core, but it's sort of blowing up this like experiment of this year. We're going to go get the experienced guys. So it would be kind of pseudo blowing it up, but not like totally blowing it up either.
Blowing it up to me is changing direction from where you were going. And their direction remains Amen Thompson,
onward,
Jalen Green, Jabari Smith, Alperen Şengün, and to a lesser extent, Kevin Porter, Tari Eason. So to me,
it's between
trading one or two of those guys would be considered blowing it up. And I think it's on the table. They have so many young guys that I would not be surprised if they moved on from Jalen Green and Alperen Şengün because they liked what they got in the other guys. That being said, they're not my pick. Let's go to Memphis. Ja Morant trade would be considered blowing it up. Correct. Tumultuous. Let's say those 25 games, Memphis is the number 1 seed. Marcus Smart's working out great. You get back Ja Morant and it's, tumultuous the rest of the way. Do you look at it and say, hey, sometimes it's just a necessary split from a young star and we're going to go a different direction? I could see it.
Washington for Tyus Jones?
That's on the table, man. It's on the table. I don't see it happening, so I'm not picking them. But that would be considered blowing it up, and it's at least on the table. It's within the realm of possibility. If you go over to Dallas, you said earlier, could they trade Kyrie? I don't think they can trade Kyrie. I'm not sure that is a thing that is possible. But really? Luka demanding a trade would be blowing it up. Him saying, I'm sick of this. And if their season goes south like it did last year, I think he would. I think he would say, man, there's no exit to this. There's no future. There's no building blocks. It's just going to be this and then next year's version of this and then the following year. So could he demand a trade? I could see it. But the clear-cut pick for me is New Orleans. This is a team that has been in limbo for so many years. They should be good. They have all these players. But would they move Brandon Ingram or Zion Williamson if they just determined that neither of these guys are ever going to play enough minutes that we can count on them, or that it just didn't fit? They're both better individually than they are collectively. And wouldn't you get a great return for either guy? Wouldn't Zion fetch a king's ransom? So to me, they're easily my number 1. Even though all these teams have some blow-up potential besides San Antonio, New Orleans to me is feast or famine this year.
It's a make-or-break year for the New Orleans Pelicans. You do a whole offseason of basically nothing. Again, no disrespect to Cody Zeller. You do a whole offseason of doing nothing. But you're basically you're projecting it. Hey, we need to figure out what this is right here. It's like in the NFL with a quarterback. It's like, we're not going to make a change at quarterback. We're basically giving this guy one more year, and then we'll make the change next year if it doesn't work out, right? That's what they're doing right now with Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram. Can these guys stay healthy? Can we actually do something? Can we see what this team looks like healthy in the playoffs? And if it's just another year of not getting to see that, or if we do see it and it's not what we want, then maybe we're going to split these guys up and move on from both of them. And maybe we do the ultimate thing of trading Zion to the New York Knicks for a bunch of first-round picks and RJ Barrett or whatever it is. Who knows? So to me, I had the New Orleans Pelicans as number 1. I do want to go back to the Kyrie thing, though. You said there's no way that they could trade him. The Lakers are still sitting there, and they basically signed D'Angelo Russell to a contract in order to trade D'Angelo Russell. Like, that's why they gave him that money. So D'Lo and Rui Hachimura right there. You move those, and they still have a first-round pick because they didn't trade both of them.
This is going to happen, isn't it?
D'Lo, Rui, and a first for Kyrie Irving, with LeBron and the Lakers. I mean, I think if Kyrie got moved, that would be the move. That's the trade right there.
Poor Luka, man. I mean, like your best case scenario is D'Angelo Russell as your running mate. Like,
rough, man. And then Luka demands a trade.
Yeah, then Luka demands a trade and it's all blown up. I mean, look, the Southwest Division might blow up. Let's be honest. If you told me Memphis, Dallas, and New Orleans and Houston all made major shakeups to their core, I mean, it's on the table. And it's fitting. I mean, where is Phoenix, by the way? Wouldn't you consider, like, regionally?
Phoenix should be in this division.
I should say Phoenix is the Southwest. I picture Southwest. I picture cactuses. I picture a desert.
Yeah.
Maybe a
for the thumbnail for this video, I Googled like Southwest backgrounds and it was just a bunch of pictures of Phoenix. I'm like, they're not in this division.
You're like, wow, how weird. Not Memphis. There wasn't any photos of Memphis, huh? Graceland wasn't in the Southwest.
Beale Street. It was like, is this what you meant?
That's so weird.
Oh, let's talk about blowing up the whole division. So when we get Las Vegas and Seattle, what do you do? You ship New Orleans and Memphis out. You send them to the Eastern Conference. You add Seattle and Vegas to the Western Conference. And then you would add, obviously, I think, Vegas to the Southwest. Do you move Phoenix then into the Southwest?
So I have big thoughts about this West because Colorado is the West. Like regionally, Colorado, New Mexico, even Dallas, Las Vegas, Utah, spiritually, these all connect to me. So Vegas should be in Denver's division, should be in Utah's division. So whatever happens there, that would make sense for me. And if Arizona, Phoenix comes in, maybe we send Portland to the Pacific. I mean, is Phoenix along the Pacific coast?
Absolutely no.
Absolutely not. And yet Portland is. So it makes sense that maybe we trade Portland, we pick up Phoenix. I guess it makes sense.
I would love to do a show with you where we just realign everything in the NBA. That'd be fun. And just rename all the divisions, too.
I'll even take Sacramento out of the Pacific. We'll take them into the West. They're not real California.
I'm a fan of just breaking up the West and East. I don't think we need a Western Conference and an Eastern Conference. We could do like the NFL and Major League Baseball where you just mix and match everybody.
This actually might be the right take. This might be it.
That's another podcast. I think we got to do that. Like, that's peak off-season stuff, though. Fixing basketball. All right. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Everydayers. Make sure that you're subscribed on YouTube, Odyssey, and wherever you get your podcasts. The show's going to be back on Monday with the biggest stories from the NBA weekend. I'm sure they're going to touch on some of the Hall of Fame enshrinement stuff.
Hall of Fame enshrinement. We've also got Team USA versus Slovenia.
Yeah. Woo. So a lot of good stuff happening here. Until next Friday, you can find me over at Locked On Heat. Adam's over at Locked On Nuggets. Have a great weekend. Shout out to Dwayne Wade, Dirk Nowitzki, Tony Parker. Everybody else who's getting in there. Good stuff.
It's a good class.
Good class.